Sdok Kok Thom is an ancient Khmer Hindu temple in Thailand, but located very close to the Cambodian border. It is not as well known as the Preah Vihear temple, but it is an important temple to Cambodian history. With me here in our VOA Washington studio is John Burgess, who has written a book about the temple titled Stories in Stone, the Sdok Kok Thom Inscription, and the Enigma of Khmer History. John is also a former Washington Post correspondent and has also written another book titled A Woman of Angkor. John has often traveled to Cambodia and Thailand and is here to talk more about the temple and its role to both nations. Thank you for joining us, John.
My pleasure, thanks.
So not many Cambodians have known about the Sdok Kok Thom temple. How is it that you became interested in it to write a book about it?
Well, in 1979, I was covering the exodus of Cambodian refugees from Cambodia after the fall of the Khmer Rouge. And a very large refugee camp was set up right on the border. And I and other journalists used to go there to interview Cambodian refugees. And one day I was walking in the forest and I came across this incredible sight, an ancient Khmer temple just sitting there untended, deserted out in the forest. And so I went back many times to visit the place. And years later, I found out that this temple was arguably the most important place for Khmer history, the preservation of Khmer history, because in this temple was found the most important inscription from those times. 340 lines in Sanskrit and the Old Khmer language, laying out 250 years of Khmer history. So it was very easy to get interested in the subject after that.
Have you been back to the temple lately, and what is it like currently?
Yes, I've been back several times. It's very different now. It has been reconstructed by the Thai Department of Fine Arts, and it is something of a tourist attraction. A lot of Thai school children go there to learn about Khmer history.
So, as you mentioned, it is a temple that contains this very, very important inscription
Yes.
for Cambodian history, and it is not very far from the Cambodian border.
Yes.
Now, in your book, you talked a little bit about this, and when I was reading it, I can't help but draw the parallel between this temple and the Preah Vihear temple, which is a lot more controversial between these two countries. And, you know, it's important for Cambodian history, and it's right on the border. Isn't that a recipe for another problem?
Well, there hasn't been a problem so far. The temple is administered and rebuilt by the Thais, and all indications are that it is in fact inside Thai territory. In fact, one of the French scholars who was the first translator of the Sdok Kok Thom inscription was angry that in the 1907 border demarcation between the two countries, that this temple was placed in Siam rather than in Cambodia.
So you mentioned that Thai school children currently visit the temple.
Yes.
Why is the temple important to these students, or in Thailand?
Well, as you know, there are ancient Khmer temples located in many parts of Thailand, in the northeast, in the east, and they are part of the history. And so students, when they're on field trips coming to this part of the country, Sdok Kok Thom is always one of the places where they stop off and they go around and they get a guided tour and they're told something of the history of the place.
Do you hope in the future Cambodian students have the opportunity to visit the temple and learn more about it too?
Oh, absolutely. This is a very important place for Cambodian history, and everybody from both sides of the border should have the opportunity to visit. I think Cambodian students visiting this place, even though the temple itself is not as big or as glorious as what you see in Angkor, it presents another side of Khmer history in that it gives you the facts and figures and genealogy of the Khmer Empire.
So you've been to both Cambodia and Thailand many times. Why do you think these border temples so controversial and so important to the people on both sides of the border?
Well, it's two things. Certainly in Cambodia, people see these temples as having been built by the sweat of their ancestors. And it's a very important part of the heritage of the Cambodian nation. Certainly Angkor and the Khmer Empire is in the heart of every Cambodian citizen today. In Thailand, I would say it's more a question of territory. In the example of Preah Vihear was controlled by Thailand, before that Siam, for many, many years. And whenever you have a situation where a country is having to give up territory to a neighbor, especially a neighbor with which relations are not always good, it becomes very controversial in that country.
When in writing this book, were you also hoping to achieve something that is relating to building peace between the two countries, or what is some of the purposes you had?
Well, certainly this inscription, which was the most important tool for reconstructing the forgotten history of the Khmer Empire. This inscription is known by the experts, known by linguists, known by historians, but almost nobody knows about it who's just an ordinary person. And so, as a writer, this seemed like a wonderful subject to take on. And, you know, I'm happy to do anything that sort of illuminates the history of the people of Cambodia and of Thailand, because, as we know, this temple is located in Thailand, and the two countries are closely related in terms of their history, though they don't always like to admit it today.
So in a way, this kind of puts that discussion to the both countries, you know, because of that as a basis.
I think so. You know, foreigners who visit Cambodia and Thailand are struck by the similarities of the culture. The modern day Buddhist temples look the same, the people look the same. The language, though it's different languages, they're both very heavily influenced by Sanskrit. So we as foreigners are more impressed by the similarities between the two cultures, whereas the people in Cambodia and people in Thailand, they tend to think more about the differences. But certainly one can hope that they would start looking more at the similarities.
Since you have a history background and you've written history books, basically, what do you think is the role of history, or to be more accurate, how both nations view history in sort of playing, what is the role of history in playing out in all of these tensions that happen?
Well, certainly this is a prime example of how ancient history affects modern history. Just as the Roman Empire in Europe still affects modern-day geopolitics in Europe, the history of the Khmer Empire and the history of Siam and Vietnam continue to affect modern-day geopolitics. And so what we are seeing in Thailand and Cambodia is just the modern-day continuation of a conflict that began essentially 1,000 years ago with Sukhothai and then Ayutthaya being established and gradually pressing against the Khmer Empire and squeezing it, just as in centuries before the Khmer Empire had expanded out into areas that are today Thailand. So, you know, we tend to view these conflicts in only modern terms, but in fact they are a continuation of conflicts that have been going on for centuries and centuries.
As we talked earlier about the other temples, you know, it's an important temple to Cambodian history, but it lies in another country, in a neighboring country. Do you think regional integration is perhaps a solution to a lot of these geopolitical problems, where, you know, a lot of these geopolitical problems that are influenced by ancient history, or how each modern nations view ancient history? I mean, Europe is maybe a good example of the regional integration. Right. Do you think ASEAN actually has a good role here, and that the regional integration, the ability to actually move across border easily, lessens the tensions that we see today?
Yes, I think definitely ASEAN is a force for long-term stability and lowering of tensions between countries. As far as I know, ASEAN has not succeeded in getting really involved in the Preah Vihear dispute, but as cross-border movement from both sides becomes more common, as the sort of acceptance of the history and heritage of the other side becomes more common, we can only see a sort of lessening of tensions in Southeast Asia, and particularly between Thailand and Cambodia here.
I have a last question.
Yes.
Do you plan to translate your book into Khmer?
I would love to do that. I would love to make this book available in Khmer and in Thai. It's an economic decision whether a book is translated. It's a very expensive process, but I hope that down the road there will be enough demand so that there will be copies available in both languages.
John Burgess, thank you so much for joining us here at VOA Khmer.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.